The Legend of Zelda, my all-time favorite game franchise. I remember when I first played a Zelda game, I was completely enthralled by the world of Hyrule. I would just run around the world, fighting whatever I could. When I finally learned what a dungeon was, it was over. I was soon entering every building, hoping it was a dungeon. So that's what I'm here to do today. To rank the dungeons from the first Zelda game I ever played, and my personal favorite Zelda game, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. So, how will I rank these dungeons? Well, two big factors in my ranking. The biggest criterion will be how fun they are. Fun is the key component when it comes to any Zelda game, especially the earlier titles, before stories could be a bigger focus. The final criterion will be the difficulty of the dungeon. Now, I won't rank the dungeon lower necessarily because it is easier. I will more be ranking them based on if their order in the dungeon order reflects its difficulty. I will not be taking the boss fights into account, with the exception of one or two. I will mention the bosses and their fights briefly, but the boss fights are something else. I may do a boss fight ranking in the future. And one final note, I will be using the Zelda Fan Wiki for my dungeon list. I will leave a link in the description. With that out of the way, let's get started with. I never even considered this a dungeon for some reason, until I read the wiki. Yes, I am a moron. But taking my inability to think logically out of the equation, this is still a lackluster dungeon. But honestly, it doesn't need to be anything more than what it is. Escape is really the Zelda series' first tutorial, as the previous two entries just left you to figure things out for yourself. And Escape does the tutorial thing great, introducing the exploration and openness of the game with having to find your uncle after he left you in the house, combat with the basic green guards as soon as you get the sword, having to find the right path once you enter the castle, just a good introduction to what is to come. It also has a great mini-boss in the Ball and Chain Trooper as you free Zelda from the cell, ending with fleeing to the sanctuary through a secret passage through the sewer, hidden behind the king's throne, ending with you getting your first heart container. Honestly, a good dungeon, but it's just a tutorial, so it's last in my dungeon ranking. The biggest knock I have against Desert Palace is that it's just too easy. It's honestly easier than Eastern Palace. The only thing that can make this dungeon difficult is if you go to the right side of the dungeon where the big key is, before you go to the left side to get the small key needed to complete the right side. Desert Palace is the first dungeon in this series where you had to leave the dungeon to get to the next section of the dungeon. So I guess that's kinda cool, but other than that, there's not much going on here. I am pretty sure you only need to defeat 3 enemies in this dungeon to complete it, not including the boss, which is honestly pathetic for a dungeon that doesn't really have any puzzles. Land Moles is a decent boss, I guess. Nothing special about it. Overall, not a horrible dungeon, but it's just kinda there. Nothing stands out about this dungeon. Honestly, and some of you may not like this, but I don't think Turtle Rock should exist. What I mean is, wouldn't it make more sense for Zelda not only to be protected by Aghanim, but also she should be at the top of Ganon's tower? It just seems off that the Princess of Hyrule is successfully captured and then is just kept at the end of a normal dungeon. So that affects this dungeon ranking greatly. As far as the dungeon itself, the use of the Cane of Samaria to create platforms is an interesting mechanic. It's not bad, but it feels tedious. What I don't really like are those tubes in the middle of the dungeon. They just waste time when you pick the wrong path. I don't mind punishments for picking the wrong path, but most of the time a punishment should be more than just added time. This problem wouldn't be as big of an issue if this dungeon didn't have a great pick the path segment later on. Make me fight my way back to that platform. That at least would be a bit of a challenge. One thing this dungeon has going for it is the way it uses a dark room. The dark room in this dungeon, combined with the Cane of Samaria platform mechanic, is fantastic. This is how you do a pick a path segment with time loss as a punishment. You make it a proper maze. While this isn't a maze in the typical sense, it does feel maze-like because of the dark room atmosphere. Trinex is a solid boss. A very solid boss. Overall, the dungeon is not terrible, but like I said at the start, I don't think this dungeon should exist narratively. Skull Woods is all over the place. Literally. The whole dungeon being split up between indoor and outdoor sections sounds cool in theory, but in practice it's kind of a mess. You spend more time figuring out where to go than actually doing anything fun, and if you guess where to go wrong, the constant backtracking kills the flow. It's got that creepy atmosphere down, the Dark Forest setting combined with the Dark World dungeon theme. All that works perfectly for what it has going for. But gameplay-wise, it's as disjointed as the dungeon itself. I am honestly at a loss of words for this dungeon. The one thing Skull Woods has going for it is the Fire Rod. Getting a fire attack in the game is always a blast, especially when it is done right, and the Fire Rod is done right. Just a fireball shot out in front of you. Now, I said I wouldn't go into details about the boss fights too much, but I am making an exception here. Mothula sucks. The challenge doesn't come from the boss itself, it comes from the moving floor and spikes. Seriously, fight this boss in another room, and it's easier than fighting the Armos Knights with the silver arrows. Just a joke of a boss fight. Skullwoods, in my opinion, is the worst Dark World dungeon, and I only have it above Turtle Rock because it at least should exist. Let me start off by saying, Eastern Palace is one of the best first dungeons in the history of the series. It's the first real dungeon after the tutorial-ish escape dungeon sequence, and it sets the tone perfectly for what is to come. The layout is simple but structured, and it does a great job teaching you without holding your hand. Between immediately showing the player the floor switches, showing progress is not just tied to defeating enemies, like in the escape sequence. The first true introduction to dark rooms, because the rooms here are not just hidden secret passageways. Introductions of enemies that require a certain item to defeat. All great things to show the player what is ahead. The Armos Knights make a great first real boss fight too. Not too hard, but enough of a challenge to make you pay attention and move on your feet a bit. It's not the flashiest dungeon by any means, but as an introduction to how the rest of the game is going to challenge you, it nails that. A solid start to a great set of dungeons.
Number 8.
Snow and ice levels in games are often a pain, and while the slippery ice floor of Ice Palace can definitely qualify, it isn't awful. Sure, it's not pleasant to having to take an extra half a second to get going, or constantly swinging your sword to stay steady, but it isn't the worst mechanic ever to control yourself on ice. Freezars are a cool enemy, and the idea of mixing in statues was a good idea to keep us guessing as to where they will come from. Vegetators are fun to watch, especially as they do their thing and you dodge them and attack them. The bomb jump skip is a fun trick to learn. Using the fire rod or bombos to free cold stare was a neat way to start the fight rather than just entering the boss arena. I don't have much to say about this dungeon, just kind of meh. Nothing horrific stands out, but nothing amazing stands out either. Misery Mire should have been the final dungeon, no question. It's got everything you'd want in a last big challenge. A complex layout, tough enemies, and that eerie, oppressive atmosphere that just screams you're near the end. That eerie feeling is definitely aided by being in the Swamp of Evil, the most foreboding overworld location, not including the area directly outside of Ganon's tower. The dungeon is the least straightforward dungeon in the game, another point in the favor of this being a better final dungeon than Turtle Rock. The puzzles are smart without being cheap, and the use of the Cane of Samaria here actually feels clever instead of a bit clunky like in Turtle Rock. The dungeon really tests how well you've mastered the game's mechanics. The hazards like the conveyor belts, Beamos, anti-fairies, the fire rod puzzle, all come together to make a great dungeon, and there's this constant sense of tension thanks to the music and the setting. Vitreous is a great challenge, probably the hardest boss in the game, and it fits perfectly with the dungeon vibe. It feels like the real culmination of everything the game has been building towards. Tower of Hera is such a weird mix of short, straightforward, but somehow still manages to be annoying thanks to that one bouncing nightmare at the end named Moldorm, or as I and many others like to call him, Trolldorm. The dungeon itself isn't bad at all. It introduces verticality in a way the previous ones didn't, really tying the dungeon to the Death Mountain area. The holes you can fall in really showing off the game's sense of depth, and it was a nice move making them be more than just an obstacle. It was mind-blowing to me as a kid that where you fell into a hole mattered. It's quick, simple, and has a solid mix of puzzles and combat. Between the first instance of floor tiles attacking, the previously mentioned holes you fall in, and this time to get the Moon Pearl, and it's the first blue and gold. Gold? I always thought it was an orange. Huh. Gold apparently, in a Zelda game. Awesome puzzles, but that boss, man, one wrong hit and you're falling down 2 floors to start all over. It's not hard, just frustrating. Overall, a great dungeon, and it fits perfectly right in the middle of this ranking. Hyrule Castle Tower doesn't get talked about enough, but it's actually great foreshadowing for the Ganon Tower climb at the end of the game. It's got the same sense of escalation as you climb floor to floor, Tougher enemies, the music getting under your skin just enough to make it feel like a real test before facing off with Aghanim. It's not a long dungeon, but it is packed with atmosphere and tension. It really drives home the fact that you're up against something bigger than just a few palace guards. The combat focus works perfectly here. No puzzles, no gimmicks, just a straight climb to the top. It's simple, but it nails the tone. A perfect midpoint between the adventure early game and the chaos that's waiting for you in the Dark World. Now this is how you do a water dungeon right. Most games make water levels feel like you are doing chores, but Swamp Palace actually strikes a nice balance between water-based puzzle solving and normal dungeon flow. Pun intended. It helps that the dungeon doesn't revolve around swimming, but water was just a theme. Limiting swimming to a few flooded rooms kept the frustration down to a minimum. Another thing this dungeon gets a massive W from is that it introduced us to the best item in Zelda, the hookshot. The way it is used feels great. Using it to find the small key to progress was a good way to introduce its capabilities. It's not overly difficult, but it makes you think just enough to feel clever when you figure things out. The atmosphere is solid too. Glooming, damp, but not miserable like some water level dungeons in this series. Argus is a decent boss, maybe not super memorable, but it fits perfectly for the dungeon. Overall, it's an A+ water dungeon. Fun and fair. I love Thieves Town. A very basic design to start, just a simple square, before it opens up into a challenging and almost hidden set of rooms and hallways. Exactly what I would expect from a thieves' hideout. Coming across an empty room, you think nothing of it and move on. Going through the back half of the dungeon, you end up bombing the floor for some reason, all while dodging the anti-fairies, Bazus, and Zazaks. You end up finding the maiden. Thinking your task here is done, you head outside, only for her to refuse, using context clues of the map and compass pointing you to that empty room. Once you enter that room, you realize the maiden is actually Blind the Thief in disguise, and the light coming from the floor above where you bombed the floor is such a great touch. It's a clever twist and one of the best boss twists in the history of the series. The Titan mitts are a good item, allowing you to lift stronger things, but not much really to write home about, given that it's just a strength upgrade. It's not the hardest dungeon, but it's easily one of the most memorable for how unique it feels. Ganon's Tower. The culmination of everything the game's been building towards. This dungeon pulls out all the stops, throwing almost every type of puzzle, enemy, and mechanic you've learned back at you one last time. Just finding the big key to start the climb up the tower feels massive, like you're truly storming the heart of evil itself. The Dark World dungeon music sells that perfectly. Tense, regal, and a little haunting. Eventually, finding the big key in the red mail gives off the sense that you're near the end, but not so fast, my friend. Now the climb begins. The climb up Ganon's Tower is a challenge worthy of being the final stretch. Each room is more challenging than the last room, from the Gauntlet to Landmolus 2 being a lot harder with just the added Medusa in the boss room, unless you are good with the bow and silver arrows, to the room with the hidden floor and purple wizrobes. The climb is the perfect challenge, ending with the second fight with Aghanim. My only real gripe? No dark rooms. Like, how do you not have a dark room? It's a small thing, but would have added an extra layer of tension and danger to make the climb even more memorable. I even know the perfect room to be dark. This one. Imagine doing this torch puzzle in the dark. Still, Ganon's Tower delivers exactly what a final dungeon should. Challenging, tense, and the satisfying sense of accomplishment once Ganon flees. If you've been following along, you know which dungeon is left. Palace of Darkness is just peak 2D Zelda dungeon design. It's the perfect mix of combat, puzzles, and exploration. All tough, but never unfair. It really does set the tone beautifully. The difference between the light and dark world dungeons is shown perfectly just by the first room of Pod. It perfectly matches the first room of Eastern Palace. But unlike Eastern Palace, all three doors in the Pod entrance room lead somewhere, not just dead ends. Just the entrance room of the first Dark World dungeon does a great job of showing that the Dark World dungeons are a massive step up, no longer being just about getting the pendant at the end. but also about finding your way through the maze. Speaking of mazes, the maze-like layout keeps you on your toes, but does a nice job of not having many dead ends like there are in the later dungeons. The hammer is a fun item. It definitely isn't the most fantasy item in the Zelda series, but smashing things is always fun and shouldn't be forgotten. The boss, the Helmazar King, is an awesome first Dark World boss too. A massive jump up in everything. So amazing. Everything about this dungeon just clicks. If you wanted a blueprint of how to design a 2D action-adventure dungeon, Palace of Darkness should be the first place you look. So that's my dungeon ranking. What are your thoughts? What did I have ranked too high? What did I have ranked too low? Anything you agree with me on? Let me know in the comments section below. I have an interesting follow-up to this ranking, so look out for that in the next couple of weeks. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Look out for my live streams. I try to stream every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. Well, that's all for me. See you all in the next video.